This is Season 2, Episode 24.
Hey, welcome to Faith Over Breakfast. My name is Andy Littleton. I'm with a church called Mission Church in Tucson, Arizona, and I'm sitting across from my buddy Eric from the Village, in the original Village in Tucson, Arizona.
The original Village, yes.
Yeah, there was no village before yours. And today we're talking about leadership, how Eric especially, forged the first village of all time.
That's right.
Eric, good morning to you.
Good morning to you.
I am happy to be talking to you on the microphone because I have a sneaking suspicion our microphones sound way better. And here's the deal: you really need somebody who knows what the heck they're doing when you're recording stuff, and we just haven't had that. So
we haven't, but especially with this whole USB thing. I'm not used to the whole USB.
It's crazy technology these days.
It is crazy.
United States brokerage.
Yeah, and how that works. But we have an old board from the Village, and we're happy about that. And we're on your Mac, and that's working good. So
yeah, we're thinking this sounds better. So anyway,
we hope it does.
Look at that. You sent me a little text message, and I liked it. Raising up leaders. And so I assume this has some church context, and it could be applied to whatever you want potentially.
Sure.
But I've heard there's a lot of church leadership podcasting out there. Are you trying to jump on that bandwagon right now? Is that
let's compete with Andy Stanley and the guy who wrote Blue Like Jazz. Doesn't he have a big old
storyboard now?
Storyboarding.
Kind of
stuff, I liked his book. I mean, it was interesting.
Yeah. Well, he knows what he's doing.
Yeah, he does know what he's doing.
Yeah, he wrote Blue Like Jazz. That worked.
That worked pretty good. And he wrote a dragon book that I read. I forget what the name was.
Not How to Train a Dragon.
No, which, by the way, number 3 is coming out.
Oh.
And How to Train a Dragon.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Do you get practical advice on how to train a dragon in these?
I think we could do that. Maybe we should change it. Instead of raising up new and young leaders and raising up leaders, we could just talk about how to train your dragon. And the dragon could be either really a dragon or a metaphor.
A metaphor. Well, let's go with that. This is the Dragon Training Podcast. So, which dragons? Do you want to talk about a couple of the dragons you're currently training? Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, got a big one and a small one.
So, okay. So, really quick though, let's distinguish. I mean, there's there are all these kind of leadership movements out there, and from knowing you guys are very, at the Village, are very grassrootsy versions of this stuff. Like people aren't just churning through books and training materials and
right.
Very structured internships, and that's not you.
No.
So what are you talking about when you say this? When you're raising up leaders, what's your theory, and how would you distinguish that from, the maybe more well-known stuff out there?
Well, I mean, everyone at some level is a leader. When I speak about it, I always joke that in my family, everyone has leadership. Even the youngest kid has leadership in that he leads the dog, right? The poor dog is trying to lead everybody else. A leader is just somebody who has followers.
Right.
Somebody will follow them, then they're a leader.
Right.
Someone will be influenced by them, then they're a leader. So there's that element of leadership that exists in all of us. Like we're called to lead because I think it is part of being created in God's image.
Yeah.
Is to speak forth something, to have an influence in the world around you. So there's that form of leadership. And then I think there's like a recognized spiritual leadership within the context of your community, your church, that has a biblical structure, because the Bible kind of gives you the structure. Mm-hmm. It gives you elders, and it gives you deacons or ministers, however you want to interpret that Greek word.
Servants. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And usually that, the elders tend to have a more, I don't want to, not in a bad context to use this word, but a ruling. They're overseers, and then the elders.
They have a lot of responsibility.
Yeah, they have a lot of responsibility. And the deacons or the lead servants or whatever you want to call them, they tend to be beyond the ground, but also have a strong leadership component to who they are. They're just kind of fleshing things out a little bit more, or in a different way.
I tend to refer to our deacons as those who serve or lead the servers, like those who lead those who serve. So they're discerning,
sure,
between, because there's a lot of, in the Bible, there's a lot of spiritual responsibility on the deacon. It's not just somebody who, it's like, oh, they're capable of cleaning up the trash. It's like, these are the people who are discerning out how to serve. So I tend to say to our deacons, like, you shouldn't do all the work. It's the church is called to serve one another.
Right.
Okay.
So there's those different positions that are held. But the thing that I have heard a lot about from other people is the difficulty in raising leaders in this generation, in this context.
Okay.
Like more and more churches are
Go
built with like older people on all of these different recognized positions of leadership. And they're finding that younger people are leaving their church.
Yeah.
And there's, I guess that's, I don't know who
Keep
that
talking.
is.
Keep talking.
We don't have a perfectly soundproofed.
Well, we don't know how it comes through.
Yeah.
We got to stop acknowledging sounds outside.
I like to acknowledge.
Do you?
Okay. You like the more professional,
I like to be professional.
You like to be professional.
Yeah, if I could train up a leader,
he'd be a professional.
They wouldn't acknowledge
They
every
would not.
sound.
Yeah, and I'm kind of rebellious in that way. Yeah, so I think training up young leaders to hold positions of lead ministers and even to hold positions of elders, and then what I would call influencers in with your community that maybe because of time or life things, they can't be in a position of, that's a recognized position because they don't have time to go to the meetings and to be present, but they're still leading in your community.
Sure.
And so they're influencers in the community. How do you raise them up? How do you get them to be at a place where they're deeply connected to God and excited about what your church is doing and also beginning to bring their own voice into all of it?
Yeah.
So how do you do that? What's that look like in this generation? Because I think it's a little different. Like when I was growing up, training a leader, I heard from very little, faithful, available, teachable.
Fat kids.
Yeah. Yep. We want fat leaders.
People used to say that. Yeah, we're looking for, because I used to work in youth group and they'd say, somebody get up front and give you a little wink. We're looking for the fat kids.
Yeah.
Faithful, available, teachable.
And it's a great truth, right? But then you would go, I've been through a lot of leadership training, programs, right? Where you have workbooks and you have exercises that you'll do and all those kinds of things. And to be honest, did I learn some things from those? Yeah. It's not that you don't learn some things, but they didn't make me a leader.
Right.
The thing that made me a leader was a man sitting down with me for 4 years, 4 hours a week, training me, teaching me everything he knew, inviting me to do what he was doing, challenged me to do my ideas, and gave me a platform to do them and allowed me to fail, and kind of then critiqued me in those things and helped me see that. Also got his hands dirty in my marriage, and
that's interesting.
So he involved himself in my life. But always opening doors for me to kind of move beyond him or to move in a direction that may not have been his direction, per se. But he tried to then contain me within what he was doing.
Yeah.
So he gave me room, but there were boundaries to all that.
Yeah.
And it provided for a lot of experiences, and it provided for a lot of loyalty. Like I would have, as long as he was at that community, I would have stayed with him. And if in the end he'd been more open about his plans in life, I probably would have still be with him. Right. Because
why don't you go over to his church right now?
Well, because he doesn't have one. He has a big trading company now, like a stock trading company. But there was a huge influence on my life, and and it's a mark that And then he did teach me sort of those things that you would hear in a training group. Like, his big motto was that church should be like in and out. You do a few things and do them well. Don't try to be Jack in the Box and do a whole bunch of things mediocre. And he's like a
Wait,
medium.
are you calling the 2 tacos at Jack in the Box mediocre right now?
Yeah, pretty much.
I take issue with that.
You can't live. Yeah, they're when you compared to ordering a hamburger at In-N-Out, it's just not the same.
No, okay, we'll let that lay by the wayside.
Well, he came from California, and In-N-Out there was no In-N-Out in Tucson, so like it was a big thing to go get In-N-Out.
Oh, right. Remember that when like going to California meant the first In-N-Out you saw,
you stopped at.
You stopped at.
Yeah,
and now
not
who cares?
So much anymore.
Yeah,
but so.
Okay,
I've still got those kinds of things.
Okay, so I've got a hard left turn question for you here. So, yeah, I agree with you. I've had experiences like that too. Are there people in your community? I'm thinking like I bump into 2 types, or maybe 3 types. Let's be honest,
just 4, but we'll cover 3.
Sure. There's the person that wants to lead, and like immediately,
yes.
and you're thinking, I don't know, and they continue to want to lead, and you continue to go, I think you're actually, and then the question, like Rod's brought up with me before, your co-pastor, leaders are ones who are leading, and there are a lot of people who I look, and nobody's following you, but you're so sure you should lead. Then there's the next type would be the type that's kind of on the other end of the spectrum, who is like riddled with self-doubt and I don't know if I can lead, who would follow me? But you look and you go, everybody comes to you when they have a question. You're involved and the kids are following you all over the room and stuff like that. And then there's people somewhere in the middle who are just kind of the prototypical fat kids. They're just faithful, available, teachable. They're just kind of like, hey, I'm here. And yeah, they do have some leadership ability and they're willing. And so they're kind of the middle of the road. But how do you decide out of those, when you meet those folks, and I assume it's not always the same, but yeah, what do you do with that?
Well, I mean, obviously for a church that's very grassroots, we have a lot of rules. So to kind of moderate the grass, to keep it mowed.
Yeah.
And I think, so one of
the village tagline, the Village Church Tucson, we have a lot of rules.
We have a lot of rules. Yeah, I mean, so like, you come and you're like, hey, I want to lead worship. We're like, well, be here for 6 months.
Right.
And get to know us and the music, and then we'll kind of walk you through that process.
We've said that a number of times,
yes.
And then most of those people aren't around anymore. Yeah.
Right. So when it comes to a person who really, really wants to lead, we say, okay, well, who's following you?
Mm-hmm.
And then we usually say, all right, how can you begin to shepherd those people? We'll walk alongside you in that. Like, how can you move into their life? Like, and so when you can demonstrate that you're faithful in that area, then we'll help you move to the next area. Maybe we'll have you come on to.
You just hit the first letter in the acronym, faithful.
Yes. No, and I think faithful, available, and teachable is important. I think there are, my favorite leader is the one who is maybe not riddled with self-doubt, but is humble enough to not push themselves ahead of people, even if they're more skilled than they are.
Yeah, I actually am the middle of the road person. I'm pretty comfortable working with somebody in that place, but I feel a sense of relief when somebody is hesitant as a leader. That to me is not a bad sign. It's not easy to work with necessarily.
No.
But it doesn't worry me usually.
Right. Well, I think there's a big shift in the church in that, like, at least when I was young, and I can say this now, being 46, is that there's a sense that whoever's in leadership, the elders, the deacons, the pastor, like they are given a certain level of respect, and so whatever they're asking of us to do, we have to consider doing it. And I think in this day and age, people are not going to step into that until they feel like they have voice.
Okay.
And so in some ways, leadership, I think, in this new world is, yes, you still have positions, you still have people leading, but you're also giving the general congregation a lot more possession over things within set guidelines. So
right.
as long as you can hold on, if you have a very strong identity and a mission, then you can let people sort of begin to paint their own picture as long as it fits into those boundaries and allow them to have impact on what's happening, because they want to know they have impact. They're not going there just to meet some friends, worship Jesus, and go home. They want to know, okay, if this is a movement, like, how can I impact the movement?
Yeah.
Because I think, you look at the world now, the biggest complaint amongst people who are under the age of 40 is that there are these huge problems and they have no impact. Like, there's no importance. Like, they're not important. And they're getting frustrated with that.
I want to come back. I want to come back to that in a second, but I just wanted to throw out. So I read a few chapters of a book recently, and there was this idea. It was kind of some older leadership people, I think, coming from maybe Southern Baptist background, or at least one of them, and they were saying something to the effect of, that people used to come into a religious organization and just ask, "What do we do?" They were just kind of like, "Who's the pastor? Who's on the board?" So, and just kind of, okay, we're here. What do we do? And they were saying now that the leader is going to, by and large, that's not going to happen anymore. But they're going to have to be somebody that people want to emulate now.
Right.
Like, that's going to be the new, and I looked at that and I went, yeah, I can see that, that people are going to be drawn to the leader, not just because they're there, but because it's someone that they go, I want to mimic this to some degree. And so this mission that gets worked out in the church has to be very much embodied within the leader instead of just assumed or stated.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So what about, so there are, I've noticed though, even within the people who you're saying they want to have a voice, they want to have an impact. I hear that a lot, and I've started to notice, I'm getting a little cranky, I think, getting kind of old and cranky. But I've started to notice a lot of complaining about stuff that's not getting done. And here's where my head goes. Like, okay, so what are you doing? I want to see action. So if I'm gonna latch onto you and what you're saying and what you're promoting, I want to see that you are committed to this in your life. So if you just, it appears that you've kind of been, every day you've just been out on a hike and, or you've binge watched everything on Netflix or whatever. And then you come to me and complain that there's, nobody's taking care of the poor. I'm going, actually, a lot of people are taking care of the poor. Where are you at in this picture? I'm getting kind of cranky with it.
Yeah.
So how, though, can teach me, Eric, how to not be cranky, but how to develop this person into a leader?
Well, on the first one, I mean, you and I we're kind of cut from the same cloth on this. So I don't really need to tell you all this, but for the audience, I'll say that you need to change your goal to a desire, and then we'll move on from that.
Yes, thank you, Larry Crabb.
Thank you, Larry Crabb.
Yeah. But no, I'm not. Yeah,
I'm just teasing.
Yeah.
Other one, I think, the thing I say to people all the time is when people say, "Hey, I don't like this," or "Hey, I think this should change." I said, "So what are you going to do about it?"
Right.
Because it's not my responsibility. I usually remind people I have kids and I have a wife, and I can't, and I work very hard in the church to do what God's calling me to do. And so if you see this, then it's something that God's calling you to. And so you need to do something about it. It's not my job. I will enable you if you need skills.
Right. I'm so happy to get behind folks. And there are people who this is not a blanket statement. I'm kind of breaking out these categories.
Sure.
People who, and this is often the ones who want to be a leader or they want to have a voice. And I'm going, nobody's stopping you, but it's like, you're asking me to put you in a position. I want you to be in that position. I want you to lead it. Right? If this is such a if it's so heavy on your heart.
Yeah, and I think internally, like that, for our people, those are good things to say. I think when it comes to other pastors and people who are trying to lead this next generation, I mean, I think, one, if you can't go to anybody in your church and say, hey, what is this particular community about? Like, what are they, what makes them significant? What makes them unique? Like, and they can't say at least something that everybody else would say, yeah, that's what makes us unique, then you're probably going to have trouble with leaders.
Yeah.
And the other one is, I think the people who are in power still as pastors are in a place where, and even in businesses, where I think they think training programs are going to make leaders.
Right.
You don't know how many emails I get from organizations about their new leadership program.
Oh, yeah.
And how this is guaranteed to train young leaders. Ultimately, I'm like, no, the only way you train a young leader is get into their life. And it's all relational now. Yes. Do you need to open up your Bible and teach them principles of leadership? Yes. Do you need to model principles of leadership? Could you give them a book or some things to do on the side to help supplement? Yes. But that's not the main point of leading. Like, I learned to preach by somebody opening a Bible with me and working a passage out and explaining it and then showing me the resources and engaging me relationally, even though it's something I could have learned in a training program.
Right.
But he engaged me relationally, which actually got me extremely excited about it. And so then I started exploring it.
Yep.
And I think this generation is so YouTube-y.
Right.
Right? And they're going to, like, if they want to be a preacher, they're going to go watch 100 preachers.
Right.
They're going to watch. You can type in how to make a good speech.
Oh, sure.
You're going to get better training on how to make a good speech than any program I could ever give you.
Right. You can develop your own program in about 10 minutes.
Yes.
Right?
So it's not about that. It's all about relationship now.
And I actually think it sort of always has been.
Oh, it has?
I mean, but it's increasingly so, I guess you could say. Because I like you, I look back and I've been to so many. I'm like generally kind of done with conferences. I've been to so many conferences and so many things. And I look back and what stuck, right, are typically like walk with me moments, and sometimes the ones that weren't even planned. Actually, a lot of them weren't planned. The ones where I was with somebody who I looked up to and they just said a thing or did a thing that I saw and went, oh, or I looked back on it and I just never forgot it. And I went, that's because that was so impactful,
Yeah. Yeah.
So how?
But I would make an argument for intentional discipleship of people.
Okay. Yeah. Well, here's where yes. So you've got a church of 150 people or so. Or who knows?
Not that big, but yeah.
500 people. You're bursting at the seams. You've got multiple services over there. You're building new campuses.
Yeah, we had 2 services last week, with a total of maybe 70 people.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's dial it back. 70 people.
Plus kids.
But you are one busy guy with a family, and so there's no way you're doing 70 intentional meetups every week. And so I know you've had to multiply leaders and stuff like that. But who gets your time and who gets the 1 hour, time where they would pick up like what that guy gave you, the 4 hours a week or whatever, or the 1 hour a week? Who gets that for you? How do you decide who gets that from you? And who, and why? You can't give it to everybody. So how does it work out that who gets it?
Well, and the cool thing at my church, 2 things. One, luckily I started out with another co-pastor who had the village being sort of a second job. So he had a little bit more space even though he wasn't being paid. So he could meet with people. But I think what's been really good is that our growth has been slow.
Gradual.
Gradual. Good word, gradual. So I have been able to invest in what I would call almost like classes.
Yeah.
In the sense of this group of people came in this wave, and I invested for 2 or 3 years in those 10 people. And then as those 10 people have developed and they've been in and out of leadership, and some of them still on leadership, I have invested in the next class of people.
Right.
And as that class has developed, I feel like I'm on class.
Came in waves.
Yes. Class number 4, maybe. I mean, I've put a lot. I mean, those people have been in and out of my home,
Yeah.
and lots of meetings with them. I'm in their marriages. I've performed their marriages, their weddings. So yeah, the problem with all of that is that you build very deep and intimate relationships with people, and then
they have to dial back a little bit.
A lot.
Isn't that a hard? I've experienced this.
This is a very hard adjustment for them, and then it becomes a harder adjustment down the road for me because now, as there's been space, they're actually just my friends. I'm not investing as much, leadership wise, and I miss them, and I just want to hang out with them.
Yeah,
and I don't have that kind of space in my life.
Yeah,
and so
and you're still the pastor.
Yes, and I'm still the pastor.
There's
and
a weird.
I am their pastor, and I operate that
right.
way. So yeah,
and that's an interesting. I have that too, where I just want to be friends, and I think there's times when that does occur, but there's still I still have this role,
right?
Like I'm still the pastor of the church, and it feels, and maybe a lot of that's in my head. I don't know,
Well, no.
It feels like I don't get the phone call to just go get the beer, because everybody assumes I'm so busy, and I am, but I'd like to be busy with not just work.
Yeah.
I'd like to be busy with just hanging out.
Yeah,
that'd be cool. But I get it, and then I would assume that there'd be what's our shared thing? It's the church, and so it's easy to just slide into that, which kind of feels like for everybody.
Right.
More official business.
And one of my better friends,
I don't know.
In the church has said a number of times, if you hang out with Eric, there are three things that are important to him: God, the church, and board games.
Yeah.
So if that's what you're going to talk about, if you hang out with him.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to ask him questions, because mostly I'm asking other people questions or offering what I know and have learned. But I think the thing that I haven't done well in this process is that I don't know. I think I haven't communicated that, hey, I may not be able to hang out with you all the time, but it means a lot when people ask me to hang out. And I haven't helped people see themselves as me.
Yeah.
So as they've evolved into things to be like, hey, no, you're actually me now. So you're the sort of pastoral, and you're going to reach to your people.
For your folks. Yeah.
Yes, and for the people. And you have to see yourself that way. And for me now, you have to look at me down the road and be like, oh, yeah, we're imitating what Eric does. We love him. And we need to create some time to get with him. But we're following him while he walks down that road, and we're doing it.
Yeah.
And I know they're doing it, but sometimes they end up in this sense of, oh, we need Eric to do this, or we need Eric to do that, or
it's no, I mean, if they could get, and this is the funny knowledge you have, it's if you could get in my head, that feeling you have, I need somebody else to do this, is how I feel as well.
All the time. Right?
Yeah, all the time. So just the fact that you feel that doesn't mean that I actually could do this better, because I have that same, back when I started the church, I was where's my person to hand this off to, because I don't know what to do. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think after 18 years of doing this, I'm in a place where I'm having to make this adjustment of, I know how to do this.
Yeah, I actually do know how to do it.
Done a whole bunch. And now I'm supposed to try to offer something that's never been offered to me. Mm-hmm. Because up to this point, I feel like, I've had training to do this, I've engaged. But now this whole model and the way we do church is different. And now I've got to hand it off to my new co-pastor. I need to hand it off to other people in a way where I'm actually making it a little systematic. How do you preach in the village context? I have to train that.
Yeah.
I've developed it. Right. How do you, disciple in a more, how do you approach these particular things? What kind of questions do you ask?
Goals and desires. When do you bring it up? When do you not bring it up?
And I give I give my church we do give them a lot of opportunity to train.
Yeah.
So a lot of our elders preach a lot. So they get to practice and they get critiqued, and we go over their sermons with them. In leadership meetings, so our elder and deacon meetings, I make them teach the books we're reading. So they have to, if we're reading a particular book, we assign all the chapters out, and then they have to do a 15-minute lecture on the chapter. To help us understand it, which forces them into a study, so there are little structures that we've put into our community to do things, to train people.
But so back to my previous question really quick.
Sorry.
Like, no, I wanted to get this from you. Like, so you've had the waves, but still I'm sure that there are people who don't get into, like, the current wave right now of however many people you're spending hours with.
Yeah.
How do those people get there?
Get where?
Into your life more deeply?
Well, at this point in time, a lot of it is either they're my elders or they're leaders who carry big burdens in the church.
That's kind of the book Trellis and the Vine. Have you ever read that?
No.
But he suggests in that, or the two authors suggest that a good leader invests in a small group of leaders who will then invest.
Kind of the Jesus principle of sorts.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the other group of people who get a lot of my time are people who are struggling at levels that others can't. Mm-hmm. Basically, after me, they're going to have to go into some kind of bigger therapy thing. Like,
right.
So I'm kind of the skilled person in that.
So leaders and people with acute need.
Acute need is a good way of describing that. Yeah. So yeah, and I'm happy to do that. But it does fill my schedule. So.
Yeah, for me, I think the answer to that question would be whoever's asking and following up.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't, I'm not going to know if somebody wants more time. Like, if anybody at our church says, hey, can we sit down to a meal and talk? Generally, I will do that within the week with them. And people go, I know you're busy, but if you ask, I can usually do it.
I'm probably at a 2 to 3 week spot.
And that could happen for me too, but I would still schedule it and absolutely do it.
Sure.
But it's kind of, but if somebody isn't asking, I don't have time. I'm just trying to give away either.
Yeah. I think a lot of the people I meet with, I'm the one who said, hey, let's sit down and meet. Let's create this.
Yeah.
Because I want to train them. And I'm usually trying to say, hey, this is what I see in you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a big part of training leaders is to paint a picture for who they are in the future.
Yeah.
And get them excited about what they have to offer and then give them tangible ways to move in that direction.
So you're a little more like the hand pick, like you see something in somebody and you go, hey, let's meet. Yeah, I tend to be more, not that I don't see things in people, I do. But it tends to be more, if you're wanting more time, then that's my signal. I go, okay.
Yeah.
Then I'm all in. And if you want to meet again next week, I'll probably do it again,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, that's a good way of being a pastor. It's because you begin to find the people who want to move towards transformation. Because they're pursuing you and they see you as a place where they can begin to grow closer to God.
Right.
Sometimes you have to guard your time and also, look at why are we meeting and what's the goals and all those kinds of things.
Yeah, that's a trick too, is it's not like any time I'll meet but I tend to use the same worn out little thing. I'll say, give me 2 or 3 times you've got in the next couple of weeks and I'll pick one.
Yeah. That is something I say to a lot of people.
Yep.
Hey, text me 3 dates and I can pick one because my schedule's very busy.
Yeah. Yep. But, a downfall, I would say, to my approach, I would assume, is there are people who want to be pursued who feel like that's not happening.
Right. Yeah.
And it's hard because it's partly kind of how my mind works, like how I function as a leader is that whatever, like Rod said, whoever's in front of me has all my attention or whatever. And I feel like I've got, like, naturally that's sort of what happens with me too. Like if you're like, hey, I want to meet, okay, and I'll meet, and we're gonna have that time, and I'm all in, know. But I'm not necessarily, sitting at home with my family later in the evening going, I really should call them. It happens, but it's rare.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think probably you should, partner yourself with somebody who does think that way,
right?
Or kind of identify people who are a little bit more oriented in that direction
to like go in and absolutely,
kind of release them to that part. I think one of the things that got me thinking about the whole leadership thing, though, and why I wanted to talk about it, and maybe you can push back on some of this, is I think growing up in the church, what I struggled with was sort of these two streams of like when you go to the actual service on a Sunday, it's not really that thought out why you do this, why you do that, and not just like why you sing a particular song, but literally why you sit in the things that you sit in,
right.
why you have coffee afterwards, where you put things, why you say things the way you say them. That was one stream. It's just not thought through. You just do it.
Yeah.
Or it's so theologically thought through that, it feels stifling. You don't it's, and so I've been thinking about it because somebody at our church who's been in and out, they're an older couple that came, a while back, and then they had to move to Phoenix, and when they retired they wanted to come here so they could be involved in the village, and I really respect them a lot, and the husband was saying, he has watched the village for a long time, and he is so surprised about how many subliminal messages are spoken every Sunday about what is valued and why you do it and how it's done, and there's just this constant bombarding of that. And I think that's a way of developing leaders, is that when everything is so well thought out and explained and engaged with and practiced, people just sort of normally step into it, and they're like, oh, this is how you do this. Oh, this is why we do this. Oh, and so there's sort of, and when it's more organic and not just theological, I think it's very important theologically that we understand how we're practicing, or why we're practicing, but even further than that there's a strong philosophy that kind of pervades things.
Well, it's like layers of, because we've been talking about the leadership layer of intense one-on-one time.
Yeah.
But then there's the leadership layer of just hearing it's kind of like the CEO of the company that's always telling you, our company is about quality and safety. And you hear it over and over, and eventually it gets stuck in, it gets ingrained in you. And that is leadership on the more of the macro scale. Sure.
Yeah. So I think that's important, and I think that's the first way you develop leaders.
Mm-hmm. And then you see who like in the group that's hearing that and is taking that on wants to engage deeply with that, right?
Yes. I think that's the very beginning of it all.
Yeah. And then who emerges from that and starts leading others in those ways, and then you might go, here's somebody I'm going to sit down with 4 hours a week.
Right. I also think the other thing that's interesting about, at least at the village, the way of developing leaders, is when I introduced our elders, I said, these are your elders, and we talked a little bit, and they're new at it, so they're going to be practicing, so some of them are going to cut your arms off,
right? And
they're going to wound you and hurt you. That doesn't mean they don't love you and they're not trying to shepherd you, but there's no way to learn other than practice on you, and at some level being an elder is barbaric, just like being a doctor. You're practicing eldership.
Yeah, if only we could work on cadavers.
Right, but you can't. And I think the other thing is, at least twice a year when I talk about the village, I open with, I'm going to hurt you, I'm going to disappoint you, I'm a human. Sometimes you're going to think I'm awesome. Sometimes I'm going to preach and you're going to think, I don't know why we ever listened to him.
Sure.
Because I'm human. You can't put me on a pedestal.
Right.
You shouldn't expect that. But you should still expect me to walk honorably and to hold my position with respect. But you can't put me on a pedestal and think I'm great, and you can't knock me off that pedestal and criticize me. Like, I'm just like you. I'm going to wound you. You're going to wound me. But God redeems all of that, and that's the beauty of it. And so when you have that picture, leadership looks a lot different. I think modeling leadership that is as Allender says, like leading with a limp. Like you have to have your wounds have to impact the way you lead. You can't shove them down somewhere and pretend like you're not a wounded person. Right.
Oh yeah, I agree.
So I think those are. I think humility. I guess the things that I would think, I was, Micah 6:8, I preached on part of it last week, but, justice, mercy, and humbly walking before our God. Like, that's what we're all about. That's what we're looking for in leaders, people who hold up justice, who practice mercy, and who walk humbly.
Yeah.
You know, and then what that looks like is something we flesh out together. I don't know. What do you think?
I agree with you.
Oh, that's nice.
Are you spending 4 hours a week with anybody right now?
Usually I average 2 hours.
Now,
you know, I think in those days I was in the hospital, working in the hospital, and so I worked 3 days a week. So I had, 4 days off. So spending a 4-hour day with somebody was easier.
Yeah.
A lot of times people work, so you can't really do that anymore.
Right.
Usually I'm keeping people, and they're like, I have to get to work. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So.
Cool.
Yeah.
I think we've had a talk about leadership here.
Yeah.
So anyway.
And
our
mics work, so that's cool. Lights are going up and down.
Yeah,
so
lights are
nice.
happening on the board. That's great.